Hi, everyone. My name is Beth Keene. I'm the CEO of Holocaust Museum LA. And I just want to take a moment before, I know there are some new people here, before I talk about the museum, because this is a time where I know many of us are hurting and in pain. So I think it would be nice for us to just start by taking a moment of silence for our loved ones in Israel right now and all of the victims. So let's take a moment together. This morning, I took part in the march on Pico. Was anyone here there? And I just think it's so important. There were 2,000 people there marching in solidarity against terrorism. And I just think it's so important, and I am so proud of our LA community because we have come together, we are united, and it's so important to show support like that. So if you find yourself at home and you're in pain, just reach out to someone, pick up the phone, call a friend, come to the museum. We're here for you. But it's so important to find comfort and to stand together in solidarity, with our community. And I have to say, I'm so happy that you're all here tonight for this concert. The museum was kind of in crisis mode all week. Some of the things that we've done in reaction to what happened is we had to immediately overnight change our talking points for the student tours. So we met with our docents, and our museum's mission is grounded in teaching the lessons of the Holocaust and making it relevant to today's social justice issues. And it's our job to articulate the truth through education. So overnight, we had a lot of work to do. So that was one thing. We have a really strong partnership with the Jewish Federation of Greater Los Angeles and the ADL and AJC, so it's really important for our organizations to work together. We have a communication channel. We actually had lunch with both of our US senators for California. They spent an hour and a half with us and some of our other community leaders. We are so lucky to live in a state like California where our leaders feel so strongly about, fighting terrorism and standing with Israel. So I just think it's important to share that. And the museum, yes, that does deserve a round of applause. The museum is kicking off a Shedding a Light public awareness campaign because we know young people today get their news on TikTok. And the spread of misinformation is just rampant. And so it's really important for us to reach millions of young people where they get their news. So that is something that we're working on too. And if you go to our website, if you're wondering what can you do to help, we also have a list of organizations that you can give to. There are a lot of emergency funds that we recommend on our homepage, hmla.org. So please check that out. And we are here for you. This is a safe space. So I just wanted everyone, to know that. And thank you so much for coming here tonight. So we're here to see a concert tonight. Music is a universal language, as we all know, and it brings us together, it strengthens us, it helps us build empathy. And the concert that we're presenting tonight is a way for us to share personal stories from the Holocaust. And that's why it's called Recovered Voices. This is music that would have been lost because of the Holocaust. And Adam Millstein, who is the program officer at the Colburn School, he's the program director for the Ziering-Conlon Initiative. And he actually put together a performance for us for our Yom HaShoah ceremony in April, where we honored the Colburn School's founder, Herbert Zipper, and performed a piece that he wrote when he was in the camps. So we are thrilled that they are here tonight to perform for us on the piano and violin, and it's a really important piece. I'll let Adam do the introduction, but the power of music is so important, and I am so glad that it has brought all of us here together tonight. So thank you all for coming, and please come back. For those of you who are new, come back to the museum anytime. We'd love to have you and show you around, and we all need to have the courage to stand up and be strong and speak out. So thank you. And now it is my pleasure to introduce Adam Millstein from the Colburn School.
My name is Adam Millstein. I'm here with Dominic Cayley, a wonderful pianist from the Colburn School, and thank you all so much for being here today. As she just mentioned, I'm the program manager of the Ziering-Conlon Initiative for Recovered Voices. Now, the purpose of this initiative is to promote and perform music by composers who were suppressed as a result of Nazi policies from 1933 to 1945. The Nazis and their destruction destroyed not only human lives, but they also completely eradicated the cultural gardens that existed in Europe before the war. So what we're trying to do with Recovered Voices is to bring voice to these composers who were suppressed by the Nazis as a result of their Jewish heritage or their political ideologies, and try to reconstruct that completely destroyed cultural garden in Europe. So today's program, we're actually going to be playing for you 4 composers, and I'll be speaking a little bit before each piece. And what unites these composers, they wrote in very different aesthetic qualities and styles, but they were all exiled by the Nazis. They had to leave their homelands to different places. 3 of them ended up right here in Los Angeles, California. And the first piece we're going to be performing for you today is by a man named Erich Wolfgang Korngold. Now, Korngold was born in Vienna, and he was a total prodigy. He was considered by Gustav Mahler, the wonderful composer. Mahler saw one of the first pieces that Korngold wrote and called him a genius. And Korngold, when he was only 11 years old, caused a total sensation in Vienna when his pantomime, The Snowman, was premiered to great critical acclaim. Now, right before the war began, Korngold began collaborating with a man named Max Reinhardt, who was a very famous director. Now, Reinhardt ended up himself in exile, and he invited Korngold to come along and to actually score his Midsummer's Night's Dream. So Korngold decided to join him here in Hollywood. And it was at this time that the political situation in Europe began to deteriorate rapidly. So Korngold actually decided to remain in Hollywood, in Los Angeles, and he began to compose rather prolifically for the cinema. And he's actually considered the godfather of the Hollywood sound. He inspired John Williams, among many others. He worked with Errol Flynn on a lot of films, including King's Row, Captain Blood. And Korngold actually said that as long as Hitler was in power, he absolutely refused to write for the concert hall. Now, following the war, Korngold tried returning to his native Vienna, but unfortunately when he went back there, he was not greeted with the same warmth that he had before the war. Critics kind of snubbed their nose at him because he wrote so much for cinema, which was very frowned upon in that time. And he actually decided to, after a series of failed concerts, return home to Los Angeles, where he died actually of a heart attack in Toluca Lake. This piece we're going to be playing for you right now is a very joyous work. It's incidental music for Shakespeare's Much Ado About Nothing. There are 4 scenes from the play filled with Viennese charm, and you're going to see here that although this was written before Korngold began writing for the cinema, you can get that sense of where he was heading and what would then shape the golden sound of Hollywood. So without further ado, we hope you enjoy Much Ado About Nothing. Thank you very much. So that was the lovely music of Erich Korngold. Now, I wanted to draw your attention. This is something so cool that we noticed, and that over here in Holocaust and Music, we're actually going to be performing two composers that are on this wall today. So the next composer we're going to hear is Mario Castelnuovo-Tedesco, who is right here. And we're about to play his lovely Sonata Quasi una Fantasia. And Mario was an Italian Jewish composer who was born in Florence, and his family was there for hundreds of years. And before the rise of Mussolini, Mario had an illustrious career in Italy. He was performing as a pianist all over Europe. He was composing. His music was played everywhere. And then when Mussolini came into power after a few years, Mussolini decided to adopt the same racial laws that the Nazis implemented. And as a result, Mario began to read the writing on the wall, when all of a sudden, one of his works was going to be performed by the national radio in Italy, and it was suddenly canceled. And he realized, oh, this doesn't seem right. And sure enough, he was able to actually escape Italy with his whole family. The great violinist Jascha Heifetz actually helped secure Mario's visa. And Mario came first to New York and then to Hollywood. And actually, he worked on about 200 film scores for MGM mostly. But what is of very particular import with Mario is that he had about 100 students, because there was not really a composition school in Los Angeles at the time, around the time of the war and shortly thereafter. And he taught 100 of the next generation of film composers. Now, some of these composers you may have heard of: Jerry Goldsmith, Andre Previn, Henry Mancini, and John Williams actually studied with Mario, who's pictured right here. But the work we're going to play for you today is actually a work, again, that was written before Mario's subsequent exile, but it's a beautiful piece. It's cinematic, it's filled with life and emotion and passion, and it's in 3 movements, but they're conjoined. It's called attacco, which means we don't stop in between the movements, but you're welcome to clap if you want to. I mean, we like applause always. But anyway, we're going to play these 3 movements, and if you listen closely, the different themes that happen throughout the first 2 movements will then repeat themselves in this kind of epic way in the final movement. And also, true to his Italian heritage, is a very prominent tarantella motif and rhythm that you'll probably be able to recognize. So we hope you enjoy Mario Castelnuovo-Tedesco's Sonata Quasi una Fantasia. So I actually wanted to bring everyone's attention, if I could, to the piano that's right here. This is actually really interesting because it's an artifact of the Holocaust Museum. This piano actually survived the Holocaust, and it's a real honor for Dominic to be able to play on it. It's a Blöthner piano from Leipzig. So it's pretty powerful to be able to play this music today on this instrument. The next piece we're going to perform to you today, if I could draw your attention back to the wall over here, is by this gentleman, Alexander Tansman. You can see him hanging out here with Mario and Eric Zeisel, and there's Schoenberg up there, but we won't do any Schoenberg today. So Alexander Tansman was actually born in Poland. He started his musical studies there, but he actually went to Paris. That's where his career really took off. And in Paris, the great composer Maurice Ravel actually introduced him to the very famous salons of 1920s Paris. And interestingly enough, Tansman actually hung out with George Gershwin and Igor Stravinsky, and he was actually introduced to jazz by none other than Charlie Chaplin. Tansman became very good friends with Charlie Chaplin and actually went on a tour of the US and hung out with him quite a lot and went to the jazz clubs with him. When the Nazis came into power and established Vichy France, Tansman quickly realized that his life was in great danger, and he quickly tried to arrange to flee Paris, which he did successfully with the help, actually, of Charlie Chaplin, helped him get him out of Vichy France. And he came here to Los Angeles, and during the war years, he made his money writing for film. He actually got nominated for an Academy Award for Paris Underground, which is a film from the 1940s. But he really missed Europe. While he was here, he was part of what was called the Weimar of the Pacific, where he actually hung out with a lot of the great intellectuals and artists and emigres of the time, including Mario Castelnuovo-Tedesco and Stravinsky and Thomas Mann and Bertolt Brecht, amongst others. But when he went back to Paris, he found, like some of the other composers that we were playing this evening, that his whole career, which was illustrious, he was performed all over the place, was completely destroyed. And he had to essentially start from scratch after the war in Paris to try to rebuild his career as a composer. And unfortunately, for the rest of his life, he was in relative obscurity. And it wasn't until later that his music started being performed a little bit more, but there's still, we're waiting to have it performed more and more as it deserves to be. So the piece that we're going to perform to you today was actually written, again, prior to his exile. This is written in the 1920s. Bless you. And this is a real example of Parisian charm and of modernism, and you're going to hear a little bit of the jazz influence in the foxtrot of the third movement. And these are 5 short vignettes, and this is his Sonatine by Alexander Tansman, and we hope you enjoy. One more piece, actually, for everyone. Not quite encore time, but maybe if you're lucky, we'll do one. So our final piece today is by a composer named Mieczysław Weinberg. There's going to be a quiz if you can pronounce Mieczysław at the end of this. We'll see, or spell it for that matter. Weinberg was a Polish composer. He was born in Warsaw to a very musical family. His father actually ran a Jewish music and theater troupe. But when the Nazis invaded Poland, Weinberg and his little sister fled on foot to Belarus. His parents stayed behind. His sister, unfortunately, turned behind, and he would learn years later of their murder at the hands of the Nazis in Travniki. Weinberg was in Belarus for a period of time studying composition until the Nazis invaded the Soviet Union. At this point, Weinberg went even further east. He went all the way to Tashkent, Uzbekistan. And it was here, actually, that his future father-in-law, a very famous man named Szymon Mikołaj, very prominent in the Jewish theater community in Russia, introduced Weinberg to Dmitri Shostakovich. Now, who here knows Shostakovich? Hopefully some people. Okay, great. So Shostakovich and Weinberg actually became the best of friends and collaborators. Shostakovich had Weinberg come out with his family to Moscow. They lived in the same apartment building. They shared musical ideas. They premiered symphonies together. Actually, Weinberg's name is mentioned in Shostakovich's diary more than anyone, which is a very interesting fact there. But following the war, Stalin began implementing very severe anti-Semitic policies, and Weinberg's father-in-law, Szymon Mikołaj, was actually murdered by the KGB in 1948, accused as being part of what was called the Doctor's Plot, which was a falsified conspiracy to take the life of Stalin. Weinberg was put under constant surveillance by the KGB for a period of about 5 years, and actually following the performance by David Oistrakh, the famous violinist, in Moscow of the piece we're about to play for you in 1953, Weinberg was actually arrested by the KGB that evening. He was accused of trying to establish a Jewish republic in Crimea, which was completely falsified, and he was thrown into a solitary prison cell where he was interrogated relentlessly at the infamous Lubyanka prison. And actually, during this period of time, Shostakovich actually agreed to adopt Weinberg's daughter in the event, as they thought, that he would never return home. And Shostakovich actually tried getting a petition together to have Weinberg released from prison. And the only reason why Weinberg was released is because of the death of Stalin later that year in 1953, and he was released alongside other quote-unquote political prisoners. Now, you might be wondering why he's on a program called Exiles in Hollywood. He obviously never stepped foot in the United States, but he actually contributed significantly to Soviet film and even cartoon music. He wrote prolifically. Actually, there's a very famous anti-war film called Cranes Are Flying, which I highly recommend. Oh, you know it. Okay, great movie. And Weinberg actually wrote the score to this film alongside many others. So the piece that we're going to play for you today is his Moldavian Rhapsody. And what's very interesting about this work is that it really utilizes Jewish themes. You're going to hear a lot of klezmer music. His mother was from Moldova, which then was part of the Soviet Union, and he actually utilizes klezmer and folk music from that part of the world, and it comes through in this work, which is intense but beautiful. It's a showpiece, virtuosic, and almost feels like a really authentic Fiddler on the Roof in some sections, and you'll see what I'm talking about. So thank you all again for being here today, and we hope you enjoy Mieczysław Weinberg's Moldavian Rhapsody. Thank you all again for coming tonight, and we have one more piece for you. Actually, we were inspired by this wall again, and if you look at that stern gentleman in the bottom left corner, that's a man named Erwin Schulhoff, and if you open up our programs, Dominic and I have actually recorded the music of Schulhoff extensively, and if you want to learn more about him, there's a really wonderful video series that we put out with James Conlon speaking about the life of Schulhoff and a lot of his music. But Schulhoff is a really fascinating figure. He was a German-speaking Jew from the Czech Republic. He was from Prague, and he was steeped in modernism. After World War I, he became a diehard Marxist and started hanging out with a lot of the Dada artists in Leipzig, including a man named George Gross, who's a very famous caricature artist. Oh, you know Gross, wonderful. And George Gross actually introduced Schulhoff to jazz, and Schulhoff is one of the first to really implement jazz in classical music amongst a long list of other things. For example, some of you may be familiar with John Cage's 433, which is the infamous 4 minutes and 33 seconds of silence. Well, Schulhoff did that about 30, 40 years earlier in the 19-teens because of an absurd Dada piece that he wrote, which is one of the first instances of written silence in music. Pretty interesting. We won't be playing that for the encore. We'll be playing actual music. Now, Schulhoff, the later it got in his life, the more committed he became as a Marxist. He started switching his style from a lot of jazz-influenced modernist music into more socialist, realist music. And when the Nazis came into power, he tried first going to the US. That didn't work, so he actually ended up with a passport to the Soviet Union. But unfortunately, he waited a little too long, and the Nazis invaded the Czechoslovakia, and he was arrested as a political prisoner. Even though he was both Jewish and a Marxist, he was arrested first as a political prisoner. And he was sent actually with his son to a concentration camp, a prisoner of war camp in Bavaria called Würzburg, in a small town in Bavaria. It was an old fortress. I actually visited there last summer to find his grave, which is there. He's buried amongst a lot of other Soviet soldiers, actually. He died of tuberculosis in Würzburg, and his son actually had to bury him. It's a horrible story. His son survived and actually became a very famous Czech New Wave director. Interesting to look into his son's work as well. But the piece we're going to play to you today by Schulhoff is filled with life. It's called Susi, or Fox Song. It's a little foxtrot, actually, and it's actually one of the last pieces that Schulhoff wrote in 1939. So we wanted to end this evening with some music by Erwin Schulhoff. And if you're interested in learning more about him, check out the programs, because we have a lot of music we've recorded. He's a wonderful composer. So thank you again for being here. This is Erwin Schulhoff's Susi.